Ever since the release of its first season back in September of 2010, Blue Bloods has gone on to become one of the most popular family cop dramas of the CBS network. And with an incredible selection of cast members on the payroll, along with unexpected twists and turns, it's really no wonder that season 12 of the franchise is so highly anticipated by fans. Funny enough, this is despite how the show has surrounded itself with some controversy over the years. But what are the most controversial Blue Bloods moments both on and off the screen, and how did they affect the fan base overall? Well, whether you can't wait for season 12 to arrive or just want to know more about everyone's favorite family, stay right where you are as we're about to explore some of the most controversial Blue Bloods moments from the past decade. So strap yourselves in and get ready for a bumpy ride, as things are about to get interesting. But before we get into it, make sure to leave a like and subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on any of the new videos we post. Number 1, the tone change of season 11. First up on our list is one of the most recent controversies that rocked the fans of Blue Bloods throughout the runtime of season 11. For those of you who need a quick reminder, the series revolves around the various members of the Reagan family, with the majority of them working to keep criminals off the street. And while this doesn't necessarily mean that they all work for the New York City Police Department, it goes without saying that family dinners are often flooded with cop talk. This is quite obvious considering the name of the show, which stems from the often repeated notion that the blood of cops runs blue, similar to their uniform. But when you have a show set in the United States involving the police, things can't always stay the same. Blue Bloods is, after all, a social commentary to a certain extent, often repeating events made famous by the American news cycle and giving the public a police officer's perspective of such events. So it goes without saying that the series had to tackle the liberal call for police reform due to the increase in violence against African American citizens. We all remember the terrible situation where fellow world citizen George Floyd was taken from this earth after an officer used unreasonable force to block his airwaves for a couple of minutes. This action resulted in the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and eventual liberal call for the defunding of the police departments across the United States, stating that many officers had grown power-hungry after being given SWAT uniforms and tactical equipment such as stun grenades. Talks are still taking place as to which movement is correct overall. Black Lives Matter for wanting the police to disappear after demonstrations of racism, or members of the public who claim that cops are under a high amount of stress and shouldn't be punished for the mistakes they make in the line of duty. Suffice it to say, it's the latter group of people that often find themselves watching cop dramas such as Blue Bloods, with others not really caring about a police officer's perspective. So when Blue Bloods went on to tackle the social and partially political issue, the fan base was not happy at all. We are, of course, referring to episode 6 of season 11, which showed a more restrained Danny getting into trouble for choosing not to fire his weapon. This seemed to show evidence of what movements such as Black Lives Matter had been suggesting, that there appears to be a hierarchy in the police department that flourishes off of violence committed rather than the practice of protect and serve. And since Blue Bloods is one of the most pro-cop shows on the CBS network, fans were certainly not happy with what they referred to as being a change in the overall tone of the show. You see, since some believe that the eradication of racial tension in America will only come from demonizing the police officers of the country, any acknowledgement of there being a problem in the justice system feels like a step towards agreeing with this position. So when the hot-headed Danny demonstrated restraint, which is most certainly out of character, fans began to wonder whether Blue Bloods was starting to change perspectives to a certain extent. But if you look back across the seasons, you'll witness a number of moments that are pretty close in comparison to this one. At the very heart of the show, it's a political drama similar to others such as Madam Secretary and The Good Wife. It has always tackled public issues and given the perspective of police officers. But here's the thing, not all police officers think the same, as can be demonstrated by Danny's actions, or lack thereof, in the episode. And it goes without saying that the racial injustice of the so-called justice system is most certainly something that many cops have to deal with on a daily basis. So why can't something like this be shown on national television without it resulting in controversy? Well, as we mentioned earlier, Blue Bloods is a cop-friendly show, and while the same action would not have sparked controversy earlier in the decade, there has been a lot of negative press placed on police departments across the country in the last few years. So while it may have felt like the show was betraying its tone, this was simply the interpretation that some fans had based on what they are experiencing in the real world. And what the fan base seemed to forget is the statement that the show was actually making in this episode. Because of the talks currently ongoing in respect of defunding the police, officers find themselves in a precarious situation. They want to protect the citizens around them, but find themselves having to think twice about a scenario when engaged with a person of color. And in many instances, this puts them between a rock and a hard place where they are damned if they do and damned if they don't. It's a police perspective that more Americans need to be informed of before they start spouting off about how the police are in general, as we're well aware that it's not the majority of the police who are racist and deserving of public outcry. But it would appear as if this message was lost on those fans who were quick to anger, shouting that Blue Bloods has changed without actually grasping what was being said by the show. Number 2, the firing of Jennifer Esposito. Before being let go by the network, Jennifer Esposito was one of the most loved cast members of the show, best known for her portrayal of the one and only Jackie Curatola. And although she was never a leading character, her position as both a detective and Danny's partner for the first 3 seasons gave a unique perspective that fans came to love. Usually, when it comes to cop dramas, we're subjected to a partner who doesn't quite understand the intricacies and stress of being a police officer. So fans of the show were happy when Blue Bloods created a character that both understood and supported Danny when he was going through some things. Speaking of stress, that's precisely how the network decided to take her character out, with Jackie stating that she couldn't even go on vacation without thinking of the job. So towards the end of the season 3 episode titled Nightmares, she said goodbye to Danny and the rest of the force, informing everyone that she was off to find a job that was far less stressful. It goes without saying that this decision didn't go down well with fans. Esposito appeared to be an incredible actress who never made waves on set and was also often described as being very close to both cast and crew members of the show. So then why did the network purge her from the show in such a lackluster way? Surely this wasn't the actual plan going forward, as the supportive character Jackie Curatola would have never abandoned Danny like this, regardless of how much stress she was feeling. The show could have at least milked this relationship of stress for a season, showing the couple trying to get over things and then ending in Jackie having to leave to find a life more conducive to her mental well-being. But no, for some reason it felt like the show had gotten rid of Esposito, and fans wanted to know why. And to a certain extent, they were actually right. You see, according to Pop Culture TV, Esposito had actually collapsed on set while filming an episode of season 3, which caused the producers of the show to become worried about her health. After seeing the doctor, she was diagnosed with celiac disease and placed on medical leave so that she could hopefully recover. So it would seem as if the fan base was wrong again by jumping to conclusions about the production of the show, right? Well, there's a reason why this situation is still considered to be quite controversial. According to reports by The Blast, CBS was actually aware that Esposito knew she had celiac disease prior to her collapse. So rather than acting like the caring employer that they should have been, they treated the entire incident as if Esposito was looking for a raise. Celiac disease can be treated with a healthy diet, after all, with sufferers often having to stay away from gluten in an attempt to stay healthy. So why did her character have to disappear? The situation was made worse by the fact that the show didn't fire her outright at first. Esposito was actually placed on suspension, which prevented her from working in the industry as a whole and precariously resulted in her not getting paid for a prolonged period of time. The suspension, as the show called it, was said to be conducive to her physical health, with producers treating it as time needed to heal before returning. Since there were, however, no plans for her return, this does seem unlikely. Number 3, questions of diversification. Last but not least, the firing of Esposito resulted in a few more controversial moments for the show, including the mention that she was fired because CBS wanted an all-white cast for Blue Bloods. Strangely enough, this is a statement that was made by Esposito herself, so it goes without saying that quite a few people jumped to her defense and made plans to boycott the show. That being said, as controversial as this was, true fans were aware that this couldn't be further from the truth. While it may be true that the leading cast are white, there are a number of cast members of color, with Esposito having once been one of them. Others include David Ramsey, who currently portrays portrays the role of Mayor Carter Poole, as well as names like LaTanya Richardson-Jackson, Nicholas Turturro, Tamara Tooney, Salinas Levia, and Luis Antonio Ramos. Suffice to say, the cast is actually quite diverse, much like New York itself, but there's no doubt that Esposito was not happy with the show because of her firing, and no doubt wanted to find a way to damage it. Quite the controversy she strummed up though. But what do you think? Feel free to let us know in the comments section down below.